You want one, huh?
Everybody else getting one.
Everybody else earn one. Pick up some of these boxes, put them in the trunk.
I get one then?
No! Come on, man, get the boxes, put them in the truck. Let's go, let's get it. Give me anything, come on. Bro, make sure y'all get everything in.
Yo, we on the clock. Let's wrap this shit up. Yo, that's it. Let's roll.
What the Jake! Jake!
Hey, hold up.
Jake! What you doing? We got a bill!
Get your ass in here, boy.
Dang. How many shooters y'all grab?
A lot. 6th Street Mambas roll deep. Anybody step to us, they get dropped.
So you rolling with them now?
Not yet, but I will be.
Yo, who those people?
That's Wild Boys crew. They rep this block.
Yo, Lux!
Don't look at them.
Lux! I know you hear me, G. Keep walking and I'm gonna show you what the gonna happen. Ain't you Reggie's little brother?
What of it?
If you is, we gonna have to do something about it. Where you going?
See a girl?
Yo, virgin ass. Okay, little buster nut, you can go. But Lux here gonna have to turn back and keep to his block.
All right, Shalom. Giving all praises, glory, and honor to Yahweh, Ba'ashem Yahushai, Ba'ashem Rakakadash. Double honors to the apostles and the elders, great millstone for teaching us his truth, and salutations to the sincere Akim and Aquathim and listen. May the blessing of election be upon your house. My name is Brother Raquai. I'm back in here with another quick and Lord's will as always an edifying lesson. And for today's lesson, I just wanted to discuss this clip that I played earlier in the beginning, in regards to so-called black culture and that seducing spirit that it has a lot in our people. And unbeknownst to a lot of our people, they don't realize that they're being seduced into a wicked, unrighteous way, right? So, and Esau has a hand in this also. As a matter of fact, I'll start off with this precept here, because what Esau does in the entertainment industry is that he incentivizes our people, our young men, especially, and the women too, to do things that are essentially destructive towards their nature, how they're actually supposed to be, right? So let me get this here. Just bear with me on this 1 second. Let me just go to Habakkuk, the 2nd chapter. This is Habakkuk chapter 2, verse 15, and it says, "Woe unto him that giveth his neighbor drink, that putteth his bottle to him, and maketh him drunken, and thou mayest look on their nakedness." And this is one of the things Esau has done. He has put that, that vibration upon Jake, incentivizing wickedness, so they can be seduced and, look at the way our nation and our young men act. Now you're seeing their nakedness. You're seeing them, destroy themselves. But Jake also has a hand in this to play in this, also. But to show that there is, that Esau also has done a very, very fantastic job in seducing our people into this wicked culture, right? But what's very also interesting about the clip also, when you look at it, the main character, when you saw, his name was Jake, right? Representing you tribes, you 12 tribes, right? Jacob, when you go back into the story of Esau and Jacob, Jacob was a plain man dwelling in tents. And when you go into the word plain, it goes into somebody who is upright, someone who has morals, character, right? This is the way, you Israelites, are supposed to act, right? But you have taken on this wicked vibration of quote unquote black culture. And this is what has led to, it has led to your destruction. It's led to your death. And now you are now just a bunch of agents of chaos, because now you see also that he is surrounded, going back to the clip, he is surrounded by a bunch of other men that are guiding him towards wickedness, that's guiding him towards destruction, chaos, to live that so-called fast life. That's not a life at all, right? So Um, let me go to, just bear with me on this. So I'm kind of just going to jump around, you know, and this is Ecclesiasticus chapter 16, verse 1. And it says, desire not a multitude of unprofitable children, neither delight in ungodly sons. Though yet they multiply, rejoice not in them, except the fear of the Lord Yahweh, Bashmawashai, be with them. Right? So you see that they don't conduct themselves as princes, and they don't conduct themselves as individuals that actually have a fear of the Lord. Because what do the scriptures say? The scriptures say a man is known by his walk, the way he carries himself. Right? Look at the way these men carry themselves. Because, and those young three men, you know, they see an image, they see a lifestyle that is being marketed to them, that's not just leading towards their downfall, it's leading to the grave. You know, that's why it's called black culture for a reason. You know, it's death and decay and chaos. You know, you take those, you know, essentially what you're doing is taking Esau's blessing, and you're taking it and then you're using it in a way to inflict harm upon your own people, because that's mostly who our people operate and do anyways. When they do have these things, they destroy themselves. And going back to Esau also, because that's what Esau has done. You know, when you go back to in the 1970s and 1980s, you know, when what's his name? The president, Richard Nixon. When Richard Nixon so-called declared a war on drugs, really covertly, it was declaring a war on Jake, you know, you tribes, you Israelites, you know, and eventually they began to fill your neighborhoods with a plethora of different devices, going back to that bottle, you know. So it was actually, you know, you had alcohol, you had drugs, you had smokable crack, you had cocaine, you know, all these different devices to essentially to destroy Jake's mind, right? But you start to see the degeneracy of what has come out when Jake goes into that lifestyle. That's not how we're supposed to be, right? So there is no fear in these in these young men. You know, you can't tell them anything. You know, they think that's the only lifestyle that's for them. Jake doesn't. They're so destroyed for a lack of knowledge to the point where, you know, you can't even reason with them. You know, they don't have they have a problem with male authority. You know, they glorify, you know, they put their mothers on a pedestal, right? And seeing that is all a byproduct of the way these men are conducting themselves today, because their what's it called? You know, their mothers, you know, also had a hand in choosing those kinds of men that they were into, right? And because those are the sorts of things that they chose, you know, that pushes that goes on, trickles down onto the sons. That vibration pushes it goes onto the sons, and eventually, you know, they think that that's okay, and that's not okay at all. It's not okay for your sons to behave like that, right? This is verse 3, and it says, trust not thou in their life, neither respect to their multitude, for one is as just is better than 1,000. I'm sorry, hold on, let me read that again. It says, for one that is just is better than 1,000, right? So you're not going to find that many that actually have that, you know, that sort of just type of character, you know, and especially if you're coming from a destitute state, because when our people come from a very destitute state, anything to do to get money is the name of the game, and it's part of the program. You know, there is no bread of understanding. You know, there is no proper civil manner of how to actually attain something righteously, right? So it says, where was I? Okay, I'll read verse 3 again. And it says, trust not thou in their life, neither respect their multitude. For one that is just is better than 1,000. And better it is to die without children than to have them that are ungodly, right? So, the scriptures is giving you a clear example. It's better to actually not have children, than to actually have them and then they live an ungodly life, right? Because look at the condition when you think about it in this society. What Esau has done is, has stripped, us of our sovereignty. So you can't execute the type of judgment that is actually needed, because when you go back into the law, if you had stubborn and rebellious sons, as a matter of fact, let me get that. Is that Deuteronomy? This is Deuteronomy 21, verse 18. And it says, if a man have a stubborn and rebellious son, which will not obey the voice of his father or the voice of his mother, and that they have chastened him and will not hearken unto them, then shall his father and his mother lay hold on him, and bring him out to the elders of his city, and unto the gate of his place. And they shall say unto the elders of his city, this our son is stubborn and rebellious, and will not obey our voice. He is a glutton and a drunkard, right? I think a glutton is somebody who eats like excessively. Let me just okay, so yes, it says someone who one given habitually to greedy and voracious eating and drinking, right? So somebody who's, that's all they do, right? So where was I? Verse 20, and it says, he is a glutton and a drunkard, and all the men of his city shall stone him with stones, that he die, so shalt thou put away evil from among you, and all Israel shall hear and fear. Did you hear what happened to Raekwon? That's the type of vibration that our nations is supposed to have, right? But being in this captivity, the laws are very, very slack, and Esau has pretty much infiltrated your family, so you can't execute the sort of judgment that actually is properly needed. You can't do these particular things anymore. So what happens then? The scriptures say a little leaven leaveneth the whole lump, right? So you have that happening with Tyrone and Pookie and Ray Ray, and eventually it starts to spread, and our people are very impressionable. So when they see that, they think that lifestyle is okay, and that lifestyle is not okay, right? That's why the laws are actually strongly needed within our culture, within our people. A lot of these problems would disappear in a nutshell if the laws were strongly implemented, on not just on the earth, but within our nation, right? So let me go to, just bear with me on this. And another aspect I also wanted to touch on is the fact that, one of the things that you see if you go back and you replay the video, is the fact that you had older men guiding him towards wickedness, right? So I just wanted to get a precept, for that as well. Because the man, one of the characters, he's the essentially he's the older brother in the show. The show is called The Shy. It's a really good show, because it gives you a social political climate of how our people grew up in Chicago, right? It gives you, essentially like a roundabout lens of how our people grow up, right? And then when you look at it spiritually, you start to see why it's important to actually have the law put forth in place in certain things. Why, for example, the young women, they're supposed to be passed on to the husband, when they come to that certain age, right? And they're supposed to be given to a man of understanding, as the scriptures say, they're waiting for a man to be established, have some type of resources. All of it, you see it in different aspects, and you understand why this is why our nation, part of it is also in tatters, because you don't see the proper instruction, the proper guidance, the wisdom being implemented. So everything is all messed up. And it's something that is very important, in building a strong nation, is the importance of the family, having both of your parents and children, having that understanding being taught to them so they know how to conduct themselves, because the scriptures say that to train up a child in the way that they should go. So when they are old, they don't depart from the way that is actually given to them. There's always some type of charge that's given unto, going through the scriptures, a charge. When you go to as a matter of fact, let me just get this real quick. Hold on. Because when you go to the word charge, it means essentially to keep something, right? Because that's in, okay, so a charge is essentially, it's a noun. Hold on. It's a responsibility when you go to it. It says a noun. It says a responsibility, a burden. It says anything committed to another's custody or care or management. Right? So I'm just going to give you an example of a charge that was given, from a father, and passing that wisdom, passing that understanding onto his son, because you see the consequences of what happens when they pass essentially a wicked charge onto the younger generation, right? So this is 1 Kings chapter 2, verse 1, and it says, "Now the days of David drew nigh that he should die, and he charged Solomon his son, saying, I go the way of all the earth, and be thou therefore strong, and show thyself a man, and keep the charge of the Lord Yahweh Bashanel thy power, to walk in his ways, and keep his statutes and his commandments and his judgments and his testimonies that are written in the law of Moses, that thou mayest prosper in all that thou doest, whithersoever thou turnest thyself." Right. So there's a conduct. So David, before he passes, he gives his son Solomon, because Solomon was the next up to rule, a way, how to conduct himself and to run his kingdom. That's what's most important. And you see that on a minute level. You see that with a lot of these different heathen nations. And when I say that, I mean, for example, a lot of these different heathen nations that own like little stores. You might see, like, I'll just use Ishmael as an example. You might see Ishmael, like the father, running things in the convenience store or running things in the fabric shop, right? And then what happens is they would have the son or the children, actually viewing how it's, the store is supposed to be run, how to actually manage the inventory, how to actually, speak to people, knowing what the different items are, right? That's one of the things that our people are missing. And I'm just using the store as a small example, but on a grander scale, this is what David was imparting to his son Solomon to keep the charge and keep the ways of the Lord. Another good example is Moses and Joshua, right? To be therefore strong and courageous, right? Because they were going into the land right? And Joshua was essentially the successor of Moses. They were going to go into the land, right? And get rid of all those different those different idols, because we weren't supposed to mingle ourselves with those different idols, right? We weren't supposed to take on that vibration, because that essentially is what's seducing our people to perform this wickedness, right? So there's just another thing I actually wanted to read real quick, since I mentioned idols, because Jake doesn't also understand that this lifestyle carries a vibration of an idol. So I just wanted to read this a little bit about, the thuggies, that thug culture, right? What that goes back to. So it says the thuggies, the cult assassins of India. So thuggies, from the Sanskrit word meaning concealment, were an organized gang of professional assassins, sometimes described as the world's first mafia, who operated from the 13th to the 19th centuries in India. Members of the fanatical religious group who were famous for their ritualistic assassinations carried out in the name of their Hindu goddess Kali, right? So this isn't paying homage to a certain god. All these other gods, we know that pursuant to the scriptures, yes, there are idols, but all these different gods carry a certain vibration. Going back to the law, statutes, and commandments, that shows you the importance to ward off this evil, right? To have this precepts, to have this understanding, right? Because Yahushua said, man should not live by bread alone, but every word that proceeded out of the Most High, to roughly paraphrase, right? So it says, who were known as thugs. The word passed into the English language during the British occupation of India. So let me see anything it says. So they used to strangle, it says they would rob their victims, they would bury them carefully. Let's see what else was there. But that's pretty much the point, because they were essentially people who were bringing they were agents of chaos, essentially. And this is why you see, you look at the people behaving the same way. So they've taken on the vibration without knowing and paying homage to this God, right? Because they don't have any understanding. They're destroyed for lack of knowledge, right? The scriptures say that the wisdom is the principal thing, right? This is the principal thing because it gives you a guideline of how to act, right? And this is what our people don't have and understand. Let me go to... This is 2 Ezra chapter 9, verse 22. And it says, let the multitude perish then, which were born in vain. And let my grapes be kept, my plant, for with great labor I have made it perfect. Right? So a lot of these YNs that you see, they're going to be spirits created for vengeance. And what they're going to be is an example of how not to live. That's not how we're supposed to conduct ourselves. That's not a life. That life just brings forth death, decay, and chaos. And then you start to become a terror, a harbinger upon to your own people, because that's what our people do. When you look at the show, it's the exact same thing. You start to push forth, wickedness onto your own people, right? You're not doing it to Esau. You're doing it to their own people. And and that shows you that they have no understanding. Because if they had understanding and, the Lord, the Savior, Yahushua was in the midst, they wouldn't be treating their own kin like that. They wouldn't be treating their own people like that, right? It shows you that vibration of all these different gods, it all comes with a vibration. It all comes with with certain behaviors, right? So, anyways, I think I'll leave it there. But I sincerely pray, and hope that this lesson was edifying. I'd just like to give all praises, glory, and honor to Yahweh, Ba'ashem Yahushai, Ba'ashem Makakodash. Double honors to the apostles and the elders, Great Millstone, for teaching us his truth. Till next time, I say Shalom.